Welcome to Buckets WNBA. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer over at Action Network, filling in for Maria Marino, whose friends will not stop, for some reason, scheduling destination weddings in the busiest sports time of the year. I'm joined for this, your WNBA playoff betting preview with the one, the only Jim Turvey. You can catch him on Twitter and the Action Network app at Turvey Bets. We're going to break down all four series of the first round. We're going to look ahead to how to play WNBA futures. Jim's got, obviously, as always, some props for you. He's got long shot plays as well. Going to get a little spicy on today's episode. Want to give you a reminder of the WNBA playoff format. First round series are best of 3, semifinals and finals are best of 5. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these prices, and why some of the favorites are so short is because, well, they're gonna win pretty quick most of the time, but you never know with sports. We'll talk about that, everything and more on today's show. As a reminder, you want to track everything we talk about today in the award-winning Action Network app. It's the best way for you to track your picks. You can follow Jim's picks, you can follow Maria's picks, all of our WNBA experts, Brian Fonseca and the crew, in the Action Network app, and go to youtube.com/the Action Network. I'm sure we're going to be doing some live buckets for the WNBA playoffs as a reaction. You're going to want to check that out. So make sure to go to youtube.com/the Action Network. All right, Jim, let's get started here with some best bets for the round one. We'll go series by series, but big picture at the top. What are the two best bets that you've got for me?
Yeah, so these are both bets that talk through on the Bet She Wins podcast as well. Got some other stuff on that one, but my two favorite, coming from co-hosts Danny Barlavi and Calvin Wetzel, we kind of chatted these through. To Leah Boston in game one to get 4+ assists, you can get that plus 150, and then a series leader prop, Courtney Williams to lead the series in assists at plus 220.
All right, let's go ahead and start getting into these series. Let's start, well, where else can we start but with Caitlin Clark, the number 3 Sun, the Connecticut Sun, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, taking on the Indiana Fever in what will probably be the most lopsided betting series in the history of the WNBA, as fans cannot get enough of Caitlin Clark. Series price on this series is the Sun minus 178, Fever plus 150. Even with the Caitlin effect, I was still like, wow, this is just a lot of Caitlin effect here in the price, even though the Fever have obviously been absolutely red hot. Including, this was what shocked me, at one book, Fever's exact series price, Fever 2-1 is the shortest series price here. Game one is Sun minus 4.5 in Connecticut. What is your read on the series?
This is so fun. So this is, we had to lead with Caitlin. We always have to lead with Caitlin, but this is the most fun series. It's the closest market. It is two teams that really, you mentioned the bridesmaids, never the bride with Connecticut. They have this tortured history in the playoffs. How perfect is it that now they get, probably the scariest lower seed coming in, this Fever team that has been electric after the All-Star break. They really, they had that incredibly difficult start to the season that was tough for Caitlin. It was tough for Kelsey Mitchell. It was tough for Leah Boston. Now all of them are playing outstanding. And it's such a good dichotomy of styles of play too. Connecticut is the slow, strong defense, not going to outscore anyone. The Fever are high flying, open, no defense. You really couldn't have crafted a more fun first round series. And I'm glad we're leading with it, not just because of the Caitlin effect, but I think it is going to give us the best product. I think it's the most likely to go to 3 games. And I think there are a lot of really fun, creative ways to bet it. So from a zoomed out, perspective on the series as a whole, I think there's a little bit of an edge here to cut out some of the fluff in what are actually pretty sharp lines right now. You and I were talking before the podcast about how these series lines are actually pretty sharp. Credit to bettors coming into the W this season and making these markets a little bit trickier to beat. I think, now comes the puzzle part. The soft lines of past are maybe gone. And now it's, can you solve the creative puzzle that is betting high level markets? My favorite way to approach this is 2 bets. Sun 2-0 plus 130, Indy 2-1 plus 280. I don't see any world in which Indy comes in, wins 2 games in Connecticut right off the bat to start their postseason careers. I also think going into Indiana, is going to be very difficult for a Sun team. If they drop one of those two games at home, they're in their head off of postseason failures in the past. That Indiana home court right now is about as strong as you will find in the W. I really like just playing those two. If you really want to get greedy, you could go Connecticut game one. That's going to be the game that, if at all, we always talk about, I was talking with Brian Fonseca about, does experience matter in the postseason? I always think that it's overrated to a degree, but it's a non-zero impact. It definitely has some impact. And I think that game one is the perfect time for it to kind of matter. You can go Connecticut to win game one, Indiana to win game two, Indiana to win game three, exact outcomes plus 600. I think that's a really fun kind of escalator, kind of little mini long shot in a series that I think is going to be close. And I cannot believe it. I feel like the square side has to be Indiana. I find myself coming back to the Indiana side of it based on how they've played in the second half of the season and how Connecticut struggles to keep up with these fast-paced teams. We saw Connecticut easily take the first three games in this series matchup during the regular season, but those were all before they were in that hectic, crazy, busy start of the season. The most recent game, Indiana won. Now, it was a close game. It was in Indiana, but I think that's what we're going to see, really close games, and to get a plus 600 at, this kind of series script I think is highly feasible is a really interesting number.
What do you think is the biggest matchup advantage for either side in this series? I'm really curious as to where you think like the biggest edge is going to be here, because like the things that I typically want to look for in WNBA playoff betting, I look for 3-point stuff first, because like there are still, and the Sun are one of these teams, like the Fever attempt 10 more 3-point attempts per 100 possessions than the Sun, because the Sun are still ground and pound for year 800 in a row. They're ground and pound. And so like that to me is like, okay, there's a high variance outcome here that gives the Fever a shot. Like the counter to that is that they're like the rebound advantage for Connecticut should be absolutely massive here. Like second chance points could just absolutely destroy the Fever in this series. In your mind, what's the biggest matchup advantage between the two teams here?
I think that's part of what's so interesting. The theoretical advantage is that the Fever are going to be able to open things up and create a pace and scoring ability that the Sun just can't keep up with. However, the Sun are like their defensive backcourt and their ability to guard. It's not even necessarily their backcourt, because you might see someone like Alyssa Thomas or Wnba Bonner, who's a forward, slotted onto those guards because they can keep up with them. They do so well limiting opposing guards and scoring. So it's kind of like, it's again this yin and yang. Where I think it's really going to come down to is, is Aaliyah Boston might very well be the pivot point. If she is able to slow down Alyssa Thomas, she actually had some pretty good scoring games against the Fever this season. I was talking to Joe Dallaire, one of his favorites bets. I hope I'm not spoiling it on here, but he's looking at Alyssa Thomas points and rebounds. That's something he really likes for her. She's killed the Fever on the glass. She's killed them in terms of scoring. She sometimes can be more of a distributor, but come postseason, she tends to kind of flip the switch a little bit and score a little bit more. So I think that Aaliyah Boston, Alyssa Thomas, who's more aggressive. We might even see, Alyssa Thomas, it doesn't have to be aggressive in terms of scoring, but in terms of if they're blitzing Caitlin and getting the ball out of her hands, is Aaliyah going to be able to run the offense as kind of a secondary facilitator? Kelsey Mitchell's not really a facilitator. She's a scorer. If you've been watching the Fever, they really have excelled at getting the ball in Aaliyah's hands, working Kelsey off the ball. They have this nice backdoor cut. It works like 2 or 3 times a game where she goes off a back screen, cuts to the basket, Aaliyah finds her. It's like a guaranteed 4 points a game. I also think in terms of, that kind of leans into the matchup coaching side of things. I found this incredibly interesting. So of the net ratings of any 5-person unit with at least 50 minutes played, the top unit is from the Indiana Fever. It's Temi Fagbenle, Kelsey Mitchell, Charlie Hull, Aaliyah Boston, Caitlin Clark. Temi Fagbenle missed large chunks of the season, and Nalissa Smith, this is not a good matchup for her. Even though she's got, Dejanay, her partner over there on the other side, who does really well against the Fever and loves shutting down Caitlin Clark and scoring even against them. It's not a great matchup for Nalissa Smith. She kind of thrives on the kind of, like a team like Dallas. She's going to do great against, really struggles against Connecticut. I would love to see a lot of minutes for Temi Fagbenle. If you're watching these games live and you're seeing there's a chance sides could slot Temi into the starting lineup, but even if it is Nalissa to start, but then we get lots of Temi minutes, I think that's very good news for the Fever. Those 5 have really been very, very successful on the court together. And in the postseason, you can kind of lean more on your best lineups. it's why I keep coming back to the Fever side of it, even though I'm like, this has to be the square side. If even like you mentioned, I think it's minus 178. I believe it opened around 170. And so all the money they're taking, the public money they're taking on Indiana. If they're comfortable still moving towards Connecticut, it means that the sharp side is most likely Connecticut. It might be one of those matchups where I am going against the sharp side here, and I'm kind of leaning towards the Indiana side of things, especially if you can get creative and give yourself a nice long plus number.
I've got this projected at 4.5, but I'll be honest with you, like my model is projecting off of full season numbers, which with the Fever is completely useless.
Yeah.
Like I've manually adjusted it to be able to give the Fever what I feel is a more representative power rating. But it's honestly like we're talking about a month and a half of data, so it's like I'm just throwing a dart at a board here. Like I've got it projected here that there's an edge on the Sun here by about 2.5 points. I have zero appetite for taking the Sun here. Zero appetite, and it's not even necessarily about the Sun playoff history, because it's not like the Sun don't win playoff series, right? It's more just that the variance makes me nervous. Here's also why I think I'm gonna have a hard time getting a bet in on this game. So one of the things that to me, and I'm sure that like I know this has been talked about on Buckets WNBA, is the unevenness of the Fever schedule.
Oh yeah,
has produced like a very different it's like the Fever, the most red hot team in the league, and it's like because they're no longer playing the top 4 teams every single night. So I looked this up. So the Fever this season are 4-12 straight up versus teams with a winning percentage over 60%, 6-9-1 ATS. And so I would think like since the Olympics, that's got to have switched. Nope, 2-4. Like they have not done better against these top level squads since the break. However, one of those was the Sun.
Yeah.
On August 28th, 84-80. So I guess here's a question I have for you, because you mentioned like trying to open up the style and these kind of style differences. The game that they won, and I don't have it, I missed that one, was not able to catch it. So if I'm missing injury context, I apologize. The outcome of that one I thought was really interesting because it was 84-80. So it's a low scoring game here that goes under on the total. My impulse based off of the read is, Fever and over or Sun and under. Is there a chance here that it's like, no, like both teams are play pretty tight, and then the Fever just have a little bit extra burst? Or do you feel like, no, this Fever defense is soft enough that the Sun are going to be able to score?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because I do think the very natural reaction would be to say, if this game's high scoring, the Sun have no chance to keep up. I think it, is another sign pointing towards the Fever that in this kind of, grinded out type of game, they were still able to succeed. Now, again, that was in their home court. They have 2 games in Connecticut because these wonky series are set up that way. So they have to win a road game even to just extend it past the sweep. But I really do think, between the Temi of it all, Temi have been like one of the most underrated players and such a perfect fit for that 5-person unit that the Fever have. I really do think that they are going to be very live in this series, and I think they have multiple ways to get there. They clearly just won the low-scoring game. The high-scoring game, we have no doubts. I think that they will at least have a chance in a high-scoring game. And again, then it comes down to how much are you weighing experience. I weighed it a little bit. I think it's a non-zero factor. But when you look at these 2 teams after the break, the net rating on the 2 teams has the Sun as, about 1.5 points better. So definitely not nothing. But then when you throw in, the change to how teams play in the postseason versus experience, there's so many different weights here. And it comes down to, I think this series is pretty much priced correctly. However, I think when you look in aggregate and you're able to do those series prices, if you chop out Indy 2-0 and you chop out Connecticut 2-1, which obviously Connecticut 2-1 is more feasible, but I think I am fine missing out on Connecticut 2-1, and you just play the Sun to sweep or Indy to win 2-1, you have yourself, I think, a nice little edge.
All right, let's move on to the number 2 seed Minnesota Lynx. My Minnesota Lynx, as I am.
Hey Matt, can I sneak in one more long shot on that series?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So we talked about Aaliyah Boston in game 1 to have at least 4 assists. I love a really long shot here. So we have these series leader markets out there. Aaliyah Boston to lead the series in assists is plus 4,000. Now, again, this is we have Caitlin Clark and Alyssa Thomas, like the 2 best assist players in the W. However, they're 2 players who, for Caitlin, she really struggles to rack up assists against the Sun. In fact, in her 4 games this season, 5 assists, 2 assists, 5 assists, 3 assists. These are her lowest assist totals of the season. It makes perfect sense. Dejanay is in her jersey all night. They have the rotations behind. It's usually the pass to the pass, maybe that's going to be the assist. So for her unders or her assists, I'm just going to be looking at unders. And Alyssa Thomas, I mentioned how she looks to take on more of a scoring burden against the Fever and in the postseason. Aaliyah Boston has taken on more of a creative role with the Fever as the season has gone along. The last time these two teams matched up, that 84-80 win for the Fever, she was the game leader in assists at 8. So I really think that there's, again, it's a plus 4,000. We're not saying it's likely, but as a long shot, I think that's really mispriced. And then it should be probably more like a plus 1,000. And it's a fun low long shot to get in on the series market there.
Man, look, I'm intrigued. Especially with what you've said about the coverage that the Sun are likely to pull out there. So, Turvey starting off with a 40-1. Can't beat that in the market. All right, let's talk about the Minnesota Lynx versus the Phoenix Mercury. My Minnesota Lynx. I am leveraged on this team. I believe in this team. I don't know why. I do believe in this team, though. Mercury are plus 610 on the series line. Lynx minus 900. That was last night. It's moved to 1,000 in some places. Lynx, I want to note, great spot here for the Lynx in terms of how the bracket shook out. Like, there's a great opportunity for the Minnesota Lynx. We'll talk about that later, but they got to get past the Mercury first and foremost. Minus 10.5 is the game one line, 158.5. Give me your handicap on Lynx versus Mercury.
Yeah, this is when you look at the series line, you see Minnesota minus 900. It looks a little bit crazy at first, but then I did my little back of the napkin math, and it's basically exactly how I would have it as well. Since the break, the Mercury really have not been, all season, they haven't really ever fully clicked. They've been 6-8 since the break with a -5 net rating. Now, I didn't count last night's games on any of these. If you hear me saying since the break, I'm not including those Thursday night games because those are really wonky and you saw players sitting and all that. So in comparison, the Minnesota Lynx are 13-1 with a plus 11 net rating since the break. They've only hit the gas. Now, these two teams actually were if you zoomed out to the beginning of the season, you said there's a playoff series with the Lynx and the Mercury. I think a lot of people would have said, oh, the Mercury are probably favored by a little bit. They have this new super team. They have a really strong roster. Minnesota has like some good depth. But what they have shown this season is Cheryl Reeve has put on absolute masterclass. And they have created such a good offense that creates so much space. Because Alana Smith, and I really do think a lot of this pivots on Alana Smith, who's had one of the more underrated seasons in the W. But with her ability to space the floor on offense as the 5, and her ability to be one of the most underrated rim protectors on the defensive side of things, they have such a good ability, especially with their starting 5. Their starting 5, we talked about that 5-person lineup data of the teams that really have a good sample of minutes. Their starting 5 is comically the best. I think it's plus 21.9 over 400 or so minutes. So they are incredible. And Reeve, if you're going to trust a coach to do it in the postseason, Cheryl Reeve has so much history here. She's going to know what strings to pull. They really, really look elite. You teased this a little bit, so I'm skipping ahead a little bit because to me, this series is Minnesota. I honestly, I don't really see a great way to bet it in terms of series price or correct score. I know some people out there are interested in the sweep. It's a little too juicy for me. Especially, some people are liking like them to sweep and the Liberty to sweep. Then you're getting you're putting 4 games at play to still get a minus money. I don't really love that. But I want that second round series. I think I'll say this: Minnesota, I think, should be rooting for Indiana. I think they match up much, much better with Indiana, even though I think Indiana could give Connecticut trouble. Minnesota has had trouble with Connecticut. So in terms of if we're looking really, really big playoff picture here, if listeners are like you and they're leveraged on Minnesota, I think you should be rooting for Indiana big time in that series with Connecticut.
Okay, I'll mark that down. I'll go order a Aaliyah Boston jersey right now. All right. So a couple of notes I have on this. I had the net rating thing. The 3-point stuff here I think is really fascinating, and the reason I say that because I asked about a month ago. I asked Twitter. I was like, why can't the Lynx win the title? And the number one thing I got back was 3-point variance, and the stuff on this is really interesting in that they've kind of boosted themselves up with quality shooting. And the question here is, I think from the standpoint of like the Lynx allow the 6th most fifth most, I'm sorry, in the league 3-point attempts per 100 possessions, but they're number 1 in opponent percentage. And most analysts are going to tell you that percentage is not luck, but it is more variable and not as influenceable by a defense as attempts. And so that gives me a lot of concern when I look across the table at the Mercury, who have the third best half court offense in the WNBA per Synergy Sports. There's all this, like, I could just rattle off all the bad defensive stats. Like, I could just rattle them off that basically, like, the Lynx should be able to put up points here. They give up the highest 3-point attempts and the most makes. It's rare that you have both. That means that you're giving up a decent percentage in this instance on such a high number. But like, here's really the question: is like, if this like, that's the path for the Mercury, in my opinion, is like, if they turn this into like a 3-point battle, and like if Carlton has like a bad series in that respect, all of these kind of elements with the Mercury, like, what does that look like? So that to me is my only real concern with the series, is that what if the Mercury are able to turn this into a 3-point variant series and things flip, where a team that has allowed a lot but allowed a low percentage is allowing a higher percentage to a better offense, and then on the Mercury side they're allowing a lot of attempts because they can't stop anybody, but the Lynx are just missing. Like, that to me is like where I run into some concerns here, given that there still is like a lot of obviously a lot of talent on the Mercury side with Copper and the like. So what's kind of your feeling on how that series that dynamic could lead to an upset?
Yeah, I definitely think that that's something to be cognizant of. I'll say two things to that factor. One is, I think that, you said most analysts are going to tell you that, they are due for regression, and that, that the percentage isn't as coachable or schemable as the attempts. I definitely agree with that. And I agree with the most part of it, in terms of, like, that is often the case. I think there is something to this Minnesota defense, in part because they are so switchable, in part because it is a core tenet of their structure. And I think Cheryl Reeve has them coached incredibly well. I wouldn't say that, you should expect the incredibly low number they're allowing, but I think that it is fair to consider them one of the better 3-point defenses. And on the Phoenix side of things, they're going to be doing this without Beck Allen. I think that's a really big part of this second half swoon from the Mercury. Beck Allen is, when you say that the Phoenix is going to need to hit threes and they're going to need to defend Minnesota's threes, I mean, Beck Allen is one of their best 3-point shooters, especially in terms of accuracy, and she's maybe their best defender. She's got the Spider nickname. She got those long arms. She's everywhere. Great 3-point defender. Missing her has, I think, been really, really key for what is a very thin roster. That was the thing with them before the season. They had this very narrow path. They had a really top heavy roster, but if anyone got hurt, it was really going to hurt. And that has been the case. I think Beck Allen, you see with the Mercury, one player missing for them can really swing things pretty notably. So I think this will be a 2-game series personally. And because of that, I think that, I mentioned the Courtney Williams assist leader at the top of the pod. I do like that, in part because this Minnesota defense is the best in the league at not allowing assists. So when we see Natasha Cloud as the leader in the clubhouse, she's a minus number on that. She has to go up against that defense, whereas Courtney Williams gets to go against one of the worst assist defenses in the league in Phoenix. But because this is a short series, I also want to give out a couple more long shots here. Of course, we're going to recycle one name. This is a name that Buckets listeners hopefully have like a poster of in their room or something. Bridget Carlton. If we get a 2-game series, her points leader prop is at plus 4,000. Anytime you can get on,
I'm in.
Anytime you can get in on these highly variant 3-point shooters. Kayla McBride at 12-1. She has not been as strong the second half of the season, but I think that's even interesting. And then even on the Phoenix side of things, say we get a game script in which we have 2 blowouts. Minnesota, with their incredible depth, isn't burning through their players. Everyone's sitting in around 28, 29 minutes. Sophie Cunningham actually was nearly there as the leading scorer the last time these two teams played, and that was on a 1-for-5 shooting from 3 games. She had 16 points. The game leader had 19. I think this could be a pretty variant market in terms of if we get 2 games, if Nafisa Collier, who is the prohibitive favorite in this market, if she's around that 20 or a game, that can really open up the potential for Sophie in some blowout going in, hitting a bunch of threes against the Minnesota bench. And suddenly in this wonky short series, we get some funky numbers. So Kayla McBride, Bridget Carlton, our favorite, and Sophie Cunningham, maybe our not favorite in terms of if you follow the W. those three being potential points leaders in this series are fun little long shots. But my favorite of the bets is the Courtney Williams assist leader prop that I mentioned Calvin gave out on the Bet She Wins podcast as well.
Okay. All right, let's go to the Aces. Number 4, Aces having what a weird season for the Las Vegas Aces versus the number 5 Storm. Aces are minus 460 on the series line. Storm plus 360. Aces are minus 7.5 in game 1. I make this only 4 in this. Like I like my from a numbers standpoint. Again, not giving out best bets on this episode for a reason. But like I find this one a little interesting. Tell me your thoughts on Aces versus Storm.
Yeah, Storm were the team I kind of hitched my wagon to from a futures perspective. And to be perfectly honest, it's been a little bit of a letdown. They kind of were slow out of the gate. They did have this amazing run during the middle of the season, but it was before the Olympic break and it was all at home. They rattled off, I think, like 9 straight at home. Now, after the break, very pedestrian, 7-7 with a negative net rating if we exclude last night's game. The Aces, on the other hand, they've been 10-5 at plus 5.2. But I think both of these teams see those numbers and say that's not as good as we are. And the result is that I kind of see this series about the right price. I do lean towards the Storm side of things as well, so I'm with you on that. But with some of the injury question marks coming into this, Jewel Lloyd missed a couple games down the stretch here. Ezzy Magbagor with a concussion missed a couple games. I think that is baked in a little bit. And then I get to this being priced around the right spot. However, I will say, again, this is kind of the theme of the podcast, maybe these 5-person lineups. Seattle's the ideal 5-person lineup here has been better than the Aces all season. And one quiet little secret about the Aces, now they were able to get it done in the finals, of course. Last year, after they lost Candace Parker, the plus 15 net rating that we saw from the start of the season slid down into like a plus 7 or 8. Like I think that the loss of any of these top teams, would they have these top heavy rosters, losing one player is much more important than on a team like the Minnesota Lynx that have like kind of incredible depth across and can handle losing one player. I have the Aces notably in a tier below the Liberty as we go into the postseason. The biggest thing here is the Aces have proven it time and time again. So if you're the type of bettor who is like, I'm not going to bet against this team until I see them lose, you're going to be on the Aces. I have more questions. The Liberty, of course, have kind of not always stepped up as much, and that's going to make for a heck of a second round series if we get there. But I think even Seattle could potentially push in this series, and it is priced so that you can get some pretty nice numbers to either force this to go 3 games or to get, I think one really interesting bet is Aces to win 2-1 at plus 290. That's an interesting bet. If you think that, the Aces they have the wherewithal to kind of pull this through in the end, but Seattle is a decent enough team that's going to force them to kind of, really, really get the most out of them. But it's tricky. I really wanted to be on the Storm, and I think there are ways to do it, but I wouldn't do it heavily if I'm being honest.
Okay, so this season versus teams with a winning percentage over 60%, you've got the Aces are actually 7-7 straight up, 8-6 against the spread. I just don't really know how to put, I don't know really where to put the Aces. I don't really know where to put the Storm here. I don't really know where to land on this. What do you think is the most important matchup if we talk about these two teams? We talked about kind of like the big picture course of these two teams, but what's the biggest matchup advantage for either squad in this playoff series?
Yeah, 3-pointers again. The Seattle Storm really struggle to get just even shoot enough threes. This is something you hear about all the time. Is like just the shooting of it can open up things sometimes. But these two teams played 4 times this season. I'm going to read you off the 3-point makes and attempts in these 3 games for the Storm. 2 for 9 in a loss, 3 for 17 in a loss, 4 for 16 in a loss. And then in the win, they were 6 for 20. This is not a high bar to cross to get to the W, but it is amazing. And I think one player that I really want to watch, and I really want Noelle Quinn to be all over this. Jordan Horton has played, she's had an awesome second year. She's really improved a lot. I think she's kind of an under the radar, most improved player option for voters out there. However, I want Sammy Whitcomb in this series. I want the 4 main stars for Seattle and Sammy Whitcomb. Sammy has a net rating of plus 21 in the 4 matchups that these two teams played this season. And I don't think that's a coincidence. They need the 3-point shooting, and they just need her spacing. Jordan Horson, again, very good player. She was a net rating of minus 25 in the four games that they played this season. So between the fact that I think that the 3-pointers are going to be such a pivotal swing in this series, and then you add in how the two of them have done against the Aces this season, I really want to see big minutes for Sammy. She also, again, if you're going to weight experience, she has a ton of postseason experience. Jordan Horston, none at all. So I think this is going to come down to, can they keep Sammy on the floor? Is Noah Quinn going to be leaning into her? Or is she going to be like, we need these to be low defensive scoring. We can't have, Sammy getting cooked out there. We need Jordan Horston to be out there. I think that might be a pivot point when you're watching live. If Sammy is out there, I think that's good news for Seattle. If Jordan's out there, I don't think it's as good news. So in general, I kind of think that the unders are the play this series as a whole. I will say one assist leader prop that I do like. We'll go a short number here, not a long number. Skylar Diggins-Smith at plus 170. Her and Chelsea Gray are kind of the two favorites. Chelsea in general just hasn't had the season. She's starting to show her age a little bit. Her minutes might go up a touch in the postseason, but I actually don't think that they're going to run her into the ground. Whereas Skylar Diggins-Smith, if you look at her minutes this season, have some room to add as she goes in the postseason. She's been outstanding after the break. If you look at her numbers after break, she's averaging notably more assists per game than Chelsea Gray has been. So getting her at plus 170 is one that I like. But you kind of summed up, this doesn't feel like it should be a wonky series that's hard to get a read on. And it also feels like there should be more hype about it. And somehow I feel de-hyped and demotivated the bet. Like I feel like maybe once we start playing, these games will be awesome, and I'll come back and I'll be intrigued by Seattle. But I don't know. There is just something about these two teams that both feel a little bit off right now.
All right, well, let's go to the very much hyped, the number 1 seed, Liberty, the New York Liberty versus the number 8 Dream. Liberty minus 2,500, Dream plus 1,200. Liberty's minus 12.5 for game 1, total of 156. I have a projection that says I should be like, that's a lot of points, and I still am like, I don't really want to bet. It's not a thing that I really want to do. Here, give me your cap on Liberty versus Dream.
It is very similar. The Atlanta Dream, man. Can we just collectively fire that franchise into the sun? I cannot believe. I was going back and looking at my futures today. I got a little bit cute, admittedly, but I was going back and reading, and I picked the Dream to go over their win total but miss the playoffs. And somehow they went under their win total and made the playoffs. So the Dream, I got to just never bet them.
Literally the last 2 years, I have bet the Dream over. And literally the last 2 years has been the single most painful betting experience of my season on futures. So I just was like, the Dream are in a never again for me for the duration for betting them on futures. Go ahead. Give me the
worst part. I never forever them once a week. And then somehow I get drawn back in again. A theme of this episode, maybe we name it 5-person lineup. If you use the 5-person lineup that they have used since the break, they've actually been pretty improved. They have a positive net rating. And they have Jordan Kanda is back. So their 5-person lineup, Jordan Kanda, Alicia Gray, Ryan Howard, Naz Hillman, and Tina Charles. If you do lineups of at least 150 minutes, that's the 3rd best lineup. Now it is behind the Liberty. The Liberty starting 5 is, about 5 points per 100 better. However, there is talent on Atlanta. And it's why I keep coming back to bet them over and over again and just getting smacked around by them. I will say the one thing that intrigues me, we've seen New York play with their food a lot. However, Atlanta, I couldn't trust to win a series at all. I think New York 2-1 at plus 410. I'm not going to give it out. Because if I bet it, it will officially lose because I cannot win an Atlanta Dream bet. However, if one were to be intrigued by a way to play the series, I think that maybe is one interesting way. I also, on a short series leader, I think Tina Charles to lead in rebounds at plus 150 is pretty interesting to me. Brianna Stewart is the favorite here, and Stewie has actually been playing awesome since the break. It seems like her 3-point shot is back, which is part of why I still think the Liberty are the correct favorites in the playoffs as a whole. I do think this Liberty team gets it done this year. However, her rebounding isn't nearly to Tina Charles's level. Tina, that's what she does. She cleans the glass. So getting her at a plus number to lead in rebounds is a bet that I actually can give out for this series compared to the other ones I discussed, but can't officially tie myself to because of Atlanta Dream.
Okay, so that wraps up the series preview. Let's talk about some title futures. So here's where the market is at one book. Liberty are plus 125. The Aces are plus 250. The Lynx are plus 350. The Sun plus 750. the Fever plus 3,000, and the Storm plus 3,500. When we look at the bracket and we look at how this can play out, are there ways that you're looking to approach this from a future standpoint heading into these playoffs?
I'm so bummed that the answer right now is no. I think it's really well priced. I think that maybe if you look at, if we look at kind of how we just broke down these series, if I think the Fever are a decent bet in the Sun series, and then the Minnesota Lynx are a solid team and a bad matchup for them, but plus 3,000 is a high number. But again, I don't see a world in which the Fever win the title. It seems like a great CLV sandwich. The Liberty, I do think, are the correct favorites, but plus 125, you can easily wait a series and see if somehow, they get lucky and the Storm do take out the Aces. That's probably going to move to a minus number, but it's not going to shift momentously. I think that these are annoyingly priced pretty well. I do think the Liberty, even though we saw in the finals last year, they really, that game 4 in particular, where there was no Chelsea Gray, obviously there had been no Candace Parker for a while. They were at their home court and they lost to the Aces. I think in hindsight, we have seen, Marie and I have talked about this a lot. There was stuff going on with the Liberty. There's stuff going on in particular with Brianna Stewart, who is still their best player and has really looked like their best player after the break. Sabrina has also taken a leap this season. The Aces have, the difficulty of going 3 in a row. The fact that, like I talked about earlier in this episode, once they lost Candace Parker, they actually, from a net rating perspective, have not been as good as the Liberty over the past 2 years, really. Since Candace went out, they have not been as good as the Liberty from a net rating perspective. And then the fact that they had the 4 of their starters putting in heavy minutes at the Olympics. I think it's all going to come, not crashing down. I think it'll be an incredibly close series, but I think it will finally wear on them. And I do think the Liberty are the correct team to be favored in the postseason right now.
New York has 3 of the top 4 lineups, minimum 100 minutes. It's pretty good. They're number 1 in effective field goal percentage. They're 5th in offensive rebound percentage. They're 2nd in opponent effective field goal percentage. They're 1st in opponent free throw rate. They don't foul. They don't put you on the line. They're 1st in defensive rebound percentage. They don't give you second chance opportunities. They're pretty good.
Oh, do we want to talk through the other side of the bracket a little bit, like that Connecticut Minnesota matchup potentially?
Okay. So I guess here's what I want to get there. Let's start there. Tell me about the Sun and Minnesota and what that kind of looks like, because that's obviously like the market expectation is we're going to have Sun Lynx. What does that series look like?
Yeah, the Lynx, it is the one team that really has kind of given them trouble this season, is Connecticut. And it kind of makes sense from, just glugging everything up. And, Minnesota has done really well in 3-point defense. Well, who doesn't really care about taking threes? The Connecticut Sun. So it takes away one of Minnesota's strengths as well. I think this series would be incredibly fascinating if we get it. Getting a game 5 in Minnesota is a pretty big factor. And I don't think people should be sleeping on the Lynx. But at the 2 numbers that are available for these 2 teams, Sun plus 750, I have no interest, because even though, I don't love them in round 1, if I did like them in round 2, again, I'm not going to like them against either the Liberty or the Aces. We've just seen that too many times. They really cannot keep up with those 2 teams. So I don't think there's value on that. The Lynx is one where, I think if you have been listening to Buckets this year in general, you probably have some Lynx in your portfolio like you do, Matt. I wouldn't suggest adding to them, but I also wouldn't suggest cashing out of them. I think that they are a very legitimate team that has, about a plus 300 chance of making the finals and winning it. They are a very good team. They definitely should not be slept on. And the potential path, if we get Fever versus them, I think that's a pretty good series for the Lynx. I'd have to dive in, to the full nitty gritty once we get it, but they have matched up well with them. They give Caitlin trouble, and they really, really tear apart the Indiana defense. So I think there's a very, very good path for Minnesota for sure. But this is one where I'd want to wait around, because I think that the market isn't going to know not how bad, but the struggles they might have with Connecticut versus how good the matchup would be for Indiana. I'd feel comfortable, I'd want to see it first and then move off of it, because I think there'll be an edge there.
I mean, I think for the Fever, the angle is really, you got to do it series by series.
Yeah.
You're gonna get an awesome price. If you think the Fever can pull off the upset, you're gonna get an awesome price now, and if you hit that, you're gonna get an awesome price the next round. That to me is the Fever are a textbook. Do not play the futures. Definitely play them series by series. The Sun, I just think I'm just very jaded.
Yeah.
I'm just are you really going to want your money on them if they're up against Aces?
No,
or
you will
Liberty?
not.
Like, are you really going to want, like, and you're not going to get a good hit. Like, you might get an okay hedge position of taking it, but you're going to have to do something like, 3-1.
Yeah.
Or 3, and then like the Sun are good enough to the Sun are just good enough to drag it to 5 games and then lose in game 5.
1,000%.
And that's the problem. That's always the problem with them. I think there is maybe some interesting angles with Finals MVP. I think there's actually some interesting angles to be found in that. Look, I'm a sicko, and I took Bridget Carlton at 121.
Bridget, if she gets that done, I think we might have to rename the podcast.
Yeah. Stewie's the favorite at plus 270. Asia's obviously second at plus 310. Although I will say the difference between Asia at plus 310 and the series and the championship price for the Aces at 250, I find that that 60-cent price. I'm kind of like, really?
And like, you think it should be even tighter? Like, you don't see a world in which they're to win it?
Like, I get how talented, and I understand what happened in last year's finals. I get it, but just like Asia's like Asia,
yeah.
And so I don't know. Like, I just feel like that it's not that it shouldn't be like 250, 260. I'm just not sure that it should be 250, 310, and a 60-cent price difference between Asia Finals MVP and Aces plus 250.
Yeah, that's not nothing. And I think if you want to be on the Aces, that is a way to approach it. There is always because these aren't 7-game series, even the finals can be a 5-game series. There is the chance for, either a Jackie Young or Kelsey Plum, who are both like great 3-point shooters, to really kind of rack up a bunch of threes. And, in a potential matchup in the finals with, so you have to think like kind of who it would be. But I think if it's Minnesota, that front court is, able to keep them in things. But I mean, Asia would just, with Alana Smith being the opposing center, she's going to average, 30 and 13 or something like that, if not 30 and 15. So I do think buying yourself a little bit on Asia is probably the way to go if you're on the Aces. But that number, I can't quite get there as loving. And, the Finals MVP, it's another one where there are a couple of fun long shots in there that I think you can go. I think one, if we want to go really long shot, I didn't look up the number for it. Maybe you can, in the moment, quickly grab it while I vamp. But Nyjah Laney Hamilton, she's one, because I'm on the Liberty in general. She was outstanding in the playoffs last season, and she has played well for stretches. And she's got the narrative as well of being the first one who was on the Liberty before all these superstars started coming in. I think she's really beloved by teammates, the media, all that. And you're going to get an absolutely insane number on it. Again, it's one of these that if the Liberty gets to the finals, it's at least a really fun sweat to watch and see if she can average, like 18, 6 and 4 while playing really good defense, and hope that, Stewie goes cold a little bit against a really good front court or something like that. But that's the only one that really jumped at me at a kind of a fun long number as well.
From a Liberty standpoint, it's not that I think Stewie's. Well, I'm not going to go there. I don't have enough of an informed opinion to give that take. But I will just say that Sabrina is kind of where I kind of look at and go. The scoring gap between them and the half court is tight enough now. Like, Stewie's much more efficient, but when you factor in play, like, I just feel like there's probably a little bit of value there. I will say this, like, I don't really have an angle on Finals MVP from outside of Bridget, from a Lynx standpoint, where I'm just kind of like, I'd rather just play, I think, the series price.
I think that's right.
I will kind of note this, and this is just like a me thing. I'm not going to bet based off of this model, but I thought it was really interesting when I got to the end of the season. And again, like, model, can be helpful, but not perfect, right? And I have questions about mine, especially this year with how different things were post Olympics. But when I wound up doing power rankings this morning after end of season, like, I got Lynx 1. That's not a surprise. That's why I've been so high on them. I got Aces 2, and I was really kind of surprised by that. So, like, I'm having to kind of stop myself from being like, maybe I just want to take maybe this is a great buy low spot for like this is. I do think this is an interesting question with the Aces of, are they who they've been telling us all year that they are? Or are they just going to do it again?
Well, I'll say this.
I think that question is
the defense since the break has been excellent, especially this last stretch. I do think that is notable, and especially because that's the thing I wanted to see the whole time is, can they flip the defensive switch? Now the offense hasn't been as amazing, and I keep coming back to the fact that at no point since Candace went down did they really get to that plus double digits net rating that we see from the Liberty, and to be honest, we see from the Lynx even. So I do think that there is the potential when you add it to trying to go for 3 in a row on top of the Olympics in a crammed season. All these other factors is what scares me off of the Aces. Now, I have faded the Aces 2 years ago and lost, and I faded the Aces last year and lost. So maybe the Aces should join the dream on my. I can't bet the dream. I can't bet against the Aces, but I keep coming back to I don't think this is the year they get it done.
I do have a data point on your offense. Number 1 in half court offense this season, Las Vegas Aces.
And that kind of talks to, if things slow down a little bit in the postseason, and maybe they're burned out a little bit, and that's why, transition isn't going as smoothly. But when things come to a grind and they are there, that's a little bit scary. I'll be honest. That's a little bit scary.
I took preseason position on Liberty last year before trying to get ahead of some of the building of the team, and then was like, oh, and then the Aces are just better. I don't know. And so now I'm going the other way, and I'm like, maybe the Aces are just better, and it's gonna be like, no, the Liberty is better. All right, do you have any final long shots you want to give out?
No, I think the Aaliyah Boston one really is my favorite of those long shots, and I think you can play the base of it on the per game basis, but I think that they're going to be looking to her in a creative role, and getting 40-1 on a series assist leader is at least a fun bet to kind of track as we go there, and what should be the most fun series, right. I think.
All right, that's going to do it for Buckets WNBA. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. We'll be back next week with episodes throughout the WNBA playoffs. Make sure to follow Jim Turvey in the Action Network app at Turvey Bets. Maria Marino will be back once again next week. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time on Buckets WNBA.